Well, I'm joined now by Peter Summit of Crashing Wayward. And for our audio audience, you just heard a conversation from last year with a few members of Crashing Wayward, including Peter. And now we're going to pick it up, see how things are going. And of course, our video audience, you're possibly seeing Peter for the first time. I know it can get confusing, this home content creation, but either way, Pete, I am very happy to have you here. Do you prefer Peter or Pete? I don't remember that from last time.
I answer to both.
Yeah. Okay.
Formally, it's Peter, but the guys in the band call me Pete as well, so I'll answer to both.
Okay, that is good to know. And a great place to go, of course, is the Crashing Wayward YouTube channel, because you have videos there, not just for the current song, Stranger Days, but also Closer, which we talked about not long ago, and a number of other songs. So it's always a great way to be able to check out a band if you hear one song and you see the video for that. And the next thing you know, you've watched 9 or 10 videos and you've been on their website for an hour. So, that's a great way to have it.
Yes, please.
So, well, how's everything going? So I know we've talked to you about singles. Just talk about what's on the horizon for 2024 in terms of releases, and if there's any touring plans that we can talk about at this moment.
Yeah, we actually have quite a bit coming up. We now, just for wrapping up and finalizing, completing the album listen, we have 2 more tracks that are going to be coming out that we held off to release at a later date. So what I'm really hoping is for those 2 songs to make it on a vinyl pressing of Listen. So hopefully we can have that finalized sometime soon on when that is actually going to be made and available. But there's 2 tracks, Dreaming and Tangerine, and a new hard hitter called In Bed With My Head. I'm really excited about those coming out.
Well, I like that you called it a hard hitter. That's got my attention. And
yeah, good. This is, it's raw. I can speak on behalf of myself. When I was in the studio tracking this, I sang it 4 times all this way through to capture the most vulnerability and rawness of it. So it's almost like, gosh, I don't know. I like to say like Guns N' Roses meets Nirvana in a way, just in that kind of like rawness.
Right. So it's kind of in the smack middle of like 1992, maybe, if it's going to be a crossroads of those 2. It's sort of like right as both of them were on their ascendancy to the peak. And, the songs that I've heard so far, including Stranger Days, Breathe, and some of the others on the website, there is... I never want to tell a band that like, oh, it sounds like, older songs, but it has a feel where it's like, it doesn't like, oh, this reminds me of this song by that band or this song by that band. But it's like, oh yeah, I kind of feel the way that I did when I was, listening to Nirvana or an STP or a Soundgarden or whatever, and
right.
It doesn't sound dated in the least. And I think it's what me personally, look, I'm 48. So I kind of look for 2 things. Oh, a band I like has new music out. Let me check it out. You can always count on Cheap Trick to put out an album every like 18 months or so. So I always appreciate that. And then a new band. I'm always like, okay, is this gonna sound like something that maybe would have been in the mix on Headbangers Ball or possibly even 120 Minutes, in the heyday of when I was a kid. And it's probably going to get my attention. And what I hear from Crashing Wayward definitely fits into, the playlists in my head anyway. And it seems, just going over the notes, that a lot of you in the band, that is sort of your background, obviously comes from just growing up on music of that era.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's important to say too is I think a lot of the stuff that what I'm listening to at least feels timeless, a lot of that stuff, like the early STP, the Cult, the stuff that's really influenced me, Depeche Mode, or, this stuff lives timelessly. You can still, It's
Right. I mean,
nostalgic, but
it's interesting because
timeless.
the cult never like broke huge, but yeah, if you hear anything from like that Sonic Temple album, or if
Right.
she sells Sanctuary, you're just like, oh yeah, this is look. There's an example I always use is it's definitely more pop, but In Excess's Kick from 1987.
Yeah.
It's a great album. It's filled with like number one singles. It sounds very 1987 though,
Yeah.
and I
True.
don't turn it off. I don't turn it off when I hear any of them. But at the
Right.
same time, you're like, oh yeah, this really kind of sounds like it,
Right.
And there's a lot of music from that era where it's like, oh man, if maybe they had faded down the keyboards just a little and put the guitar up a little bit. Some people say that about
Right.
a whole entire Rush albums, So
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the interesting, that's, what we did was 5 guys, 2 guitars, bass player, drummer, and a vocalist, and it's like it's rock and roll, alternative, modern, whatever you want to call it, in the purest and rawest form. And we just took whatever influenced us, whatever we were feeling, and created, what we felt was a timeless album, but also does feel nostalgic too, because, uh, we're not reinventing the wheel by any
right.
means, so all we can do is just write the best song that we feel feels good to us and also relate to others and stuff. So but yeah, going back to the cult real quick, I remember when I was younger, my brother, I just remember this story that he said that if you ever want to get a party started, just put on the Cult. So that always stuck with me, is like,
it's a great point. And I
Yeah.
think Ian Astbury is underappreciated, especially thinking back to, oh my gosh, it was 20 years ago now, wasn't it? There was a moment in time where he fronted a version of the Doors that was the other three, and he basically stepped in for Morrison. And it wasn't like Val Kilmer in the movie where he was trying to act like him, but at the same time he kind of had that presence, but also not everybody has the right voice for that. So it was like,
Right.
oh yeah, this guy just kind of stepped into the shoes of a rock god,
Right.
and
Totally.
didn't miss a beat. And a few years ago they opened for Guns N' Roses here in LA. So I had actually just one of those. I had never seen them before, and
Oh,
it was
really?
great
That
to
was
get, it was great to check them out. I think that was 2016. I don't know, but
yeah. I think the first time I saw them was actually when they got back together for the album Far Beyond Good and Evil with Matt Sorum.
Oh, right.
And Ian actually regrew his hair, so he actually had it longer at that time.
Oh, nice.
It was just like they came out with gosh, what was it? Little Devil or something like that. Anyways, it was like, wow.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously, we touched on GNR for a minute. Obviously, Matt Sorum, an incredible part of GNR that, he's not part of the reunion tour. They don't really talk about him that much. But I mean, I remember, look, I don't love drum solos, but Matt Sorum drum solo where it started to sound like a motorcycle starting up is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, know? And for a little while, when Alice Cooper's Hollywood Vampires first started, Matt Sorum was actually the drummer on that. And that was great because it was like Duff wasn't back in Guns N' Roses, so he was in that band. So it was like, and it's I haven't seen him in a few years, but he, it was like, I think Steven Adler gave them what they needed for Appetite for Destruction, but seeing them in stadiums where they would play like 3 hours in the 90s, I think Matt Sorum was really, an unspoken part of what really pushed GNR.
Totally. I think, he's a great drummer, and he's got like a big cool factor for me. And he's also a songwriter too. He wrote one of my favorite Velvet Revolver songs, She Builds Quick Machines.
Oh, right. Of course.
Off
Yeah.
Libertad,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't even, it's funny.
Velvet
Revolver is one of those things that it's easy to forget that moment in time. Weiland's not around anymore. So some of those other guys are back in GNR, but I do know that GNR does play, I think Slither, they play like one Velvet Revolver song.
They did.
When you do 3.5 hour shows, you can kind of slip some other things in there,
Yeah. Yeah. I did see them do Slither, and I hate to say it, and I probably sound like a jerk saying it, but watching them do it only made me miss Velvet Revolver even more.
Yeah.
That was a great band.
I had a dumb luck with Velvet Revolver. I never saw them in concert, but I did see them perform live. I worked on the NBC lot in Burbank here in LA, and they were and they didn't do a lot of this, but they were on the Tonight Show, and they filmed it outside in the parking lot. So I'm like, well, I don't have to work that hard. I mean, I worked on a different show. I'm like, I'm definitely going to watch this, and it was amazing, and that's the only time I ever saw Wyland, because I never saw STP. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's also kind of cooler because it was like maybe like I don't know 150 people just kind of crammed outside. So yeah, and Velvet Revolver is definitely one of those sort of moments in time. It's like, there was Slash's Snake Pit, and there was all this other stuff that were like non-GNR projects. And but to be fair, and I know we'll talk about Crash and Wayward in a second, obviously. Yeah. But Slash still puts out those great albums with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. Like I think it was like a year and a half ago now they put out another one, and it's like, I don't let Axl hear, but I'd rather listen to this than any of those new GNR songs that are left over from Chinese Democracy,
Yeah, or even going all the way back to Appetite for Destruction. It's like I'd really love to hear what they're doing now. What they can write and create now.
And I there's the theory out there that the only reason they're able to still tour and be together for those long shows after 8 years is that they don't get in the studio and try and do new stuff, which is disappointing, because even I mean, let's just start small, get them all in the studio, come out with one song. You don't have to do an album, just like, let's hear what that one song is, and then if it goes well, try again. Besides, it's everything seems to be motivated by singles now, anyway.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
But back to your band, we don't need to help. We don't need to tell GNR what they need to do.
I can. Yeah, totally. Like, who am I?
But hey, I'm just somebody that's like, hey, I'd like to hear this stuff, and I think a lot of people would. And GNR and some of those bands, doing big tours, it kind of disproves there's that idea that every few years Gene Simmons will go out there and say rock is dead, and he gets all the headlines and he has something to promote whenever he says it. So that's Gene's business. But at the same time,
comment to say about that.
Please do.
I was actually just watching a video, and it was actually I forget who it was, but it was speaking on the algorithms, the AI algorithms, and doing all the research, the looking at all the stats and the data of where music is based off the charts. And right now hip hop is kind of it's at a low. You have pop, hip hop and pop are always going to dominate, and then you have country that's rising, and then you have rock and roll that's rising. Rock and roll, I hate that statement that rock and roll is dead. People still go see rock and roll shows. They're the highest growing concerts, and tours still to this day.
It's like once you get past Taylor Swift, then it's mostly rock,
right? Queens of the Stone Age, Foo Fighters, U2, whatever. Guns N'
U2 doing, I don't know what it ended up being, like 30 dates at the Sphere in Vegas, where every night is like, I don't know, 20,000. I'm not sure what the exact capacity is, but either way, it's like it's so huge. So And look, I sometimes am guilty of the same thing, where I'll try to think like, oh man, I haven't heard any new bands in a while, but it's like, you just have to look for them. And unfortunately, one of the best ways where you used to find bands was opening for established bands, but now everybody's a little gun shy. So they're like, we're going to double up and just have a couple of headliners. And, so how are you finding that? Are you doing headline shows? Are you teaming up with bands, when you guys do get to play?
Yeah. So here in Vegas, we've been fortunate enough to do most of the shows we do are headlining shows at Vamped, which is an awesome venue. That's kind of like our home base. Danny Coker and his wife Corey own and operate that.
Right, and people know Danny from the he had the show, right? The Counting Cars.
Cars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we're always looking for the other opportunities to open for the nationals that are coming through, just to get that, that audience that doesn't know who we are yet in our own,
Right.
in our hometown, whether it be like House of Blues or Brooklyn Bowl, which we've been able to do. And we opened up for Puddle of Mud, and the audience was amazing for that. I mean,
Oh, great.
we got to go on and do an hour set for that. So we love taking those opportunities and doing that. We just did our first little Midwest run through, what was it? Nebraska, Des Moines, Iowa, South Dakota, and North Dakota, which was pretty much just us, most of those dates on our own. So we actually were the only band on the bill. Fortunately, in Iowa, we played with a band called Hairball, which does a like arena size tribute to some of the greatest rock acts of all time.
Oh, cool.
So they bring in a huge crowd, which is about 4,000 people. So we got to open up for them and play in front of 4,000 people, which is pretty awesome. I would love to do that every single night, but yeah, we're new still,
Yeah,
people are
of
just
course.
starting to get to know who we are. But I think what is happening when they see us live, and we play live right now, there's no tracks. It's all us. And we're converting people into, into Crashing Wayward fans, which is the main goal. And we're just kind of getting our name out there, and hopefully we'll be opening up for a lot more nationals in front of those large audiences real soon.
Right. And I think one of the great things about is the whole band based in Vegas because, or at least close to it, because that, if you're all based in, well, you talked about playing Nebraska. If you had been based in Nebraska, you'd have a great popularity in Nebraska.
Right.
But, and I think sometimes places like that are very loyal to the bands who do come and play, but
Right.
But in terms of actually, are you based in Vegas where is it pretty easy where it's like, hey, next Monday, can you jump on this show? Or is it a little bit more complicated?
We're all based in Vegas, with the exception of David Harris, our guitarist, one of our guitarists. He is out of Ohio and Vegas. So he does hop on a plane whenever is needed and gets to town if we have something coming up. But yeah, it's interesting. I love Vegas. Very supportive of rock and roll and live music. There's just so much going on all the time, so we could have something that could be a big, huge night for us. But hey, U2's in town, Metallica's in town, Guns N' Roses, all on the same night. So
yeah, because I live in LA, I end up in Vegas a few times a year. I mean, it's, if you time it right, it's a 4-hour drive. And,
right.
I've seen some great shows there. And there have been times where I'm like, I have to pick which show I want to go to, because everybody's playing one night, so I got to figure out how to make it all work. And it's the same thing. I mean, in a lot of ways in LA, there's a band basically from the early 90s that I really like. They were a sub pop band called the Afghan Wigs, and they announced a tour, and I was really excited. And I'm like, oh, I have tickets to see the Rolling Stones that night. So I'm like, all right, but I can go see them in Anaheim. But it's like one of those things, and I didn't even know the Sub Pop hack because it's flipped up.
Oh yeah,
I was just visiting my sister in Seattle. They have a Sub Pop store in the Seattle airport, and I definitely spent more money than I should have. But also, they have a whole wall of cassettes, and I have a car that still has a cassette player in it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I want the Love Battery album on cassette. I'd love to be able to throw that on. So it can be hard, I mean, I guess it's good, but yeah, you can have a big show announced and it's planned, and then you get crazy things. I remember there was a night where in different parts of the city, like Sebastian Bach was playing in one corner, and Skid Row, who haven't had him in it in 20 years, they're playing in. So it's like, you could accidentally get like both Great Whites, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that can happen. So, but I think it is great. And it does seem to be, every show that I've ever been to, whether it's Tesla or Weezer, or I actually saw the Stones there once, Vegas, it's great. It's definitely great crowds, even though I'm sure it's like percentage wise, it's probably maybe half locals, but it's just a lot of people who are like, Oh, cool. I'll check this out. So,
Right.
that has to be great. Now, are you from Vegas or did you just end up there?
No, I'm originally from Southern California, and it's the band that brought me out here. And it's just more opportunity. You
Yeah.
get more bang for your buck out here, obviously, than Southern California.
Yes,
Yeah,
the amount of bang for all the bucks has
yes.
not gone very far in Burbank. So yes.
Yeah. But I'm born and raised Southern California. I never imagined living anywhere else. I came here and it's like one of the best things I've for me and my family. So there's always something to do. Without going to the strip,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to take any freeways to get anywhere. There's always something to do. There's great food, there's great entertainment, and there's very good people here. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, even it's one of those things. So I have an 8-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and we'll not every time we come do we bring them, but we'll go. Like we went for spring break last year, and people at first are like, "You brought the kids to Vegas?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, the only thing we did on the strip was go to the M&M store, you know."
Right.
But it's
Totally.
like there's like this aquarium and that aquarium and this children's museum. But even before we had kids, my wife and I, we always like to stay off the strip. Like if we stayed in a casino, it would be like the Orleans because
Mhm.
then you can get in and out pretty easily. And because we always drive, we like to have a car. And yeah, there's, you just need to know a couple locals that'll tell you like this is the cool bar to go to.
Yeah.
This is the great Italian restaurant that nobody knows because it's not on the strip. And
Right.
yeah, I mean Vegas, it's a tremendous place to go. But also, you're talking about relocating there. It seems like so many musicians who were based in California are like, I'm close enough that if I have a meeting, even later today, I could get there if I had to, it's like, it's close enough. You could fly. It's like 45-minute flight, all that. So
Right.
it seems to make sense over like the last decade, at least as somebody who, is just a fan of music, that Vegas and Nashville seem to be the place that a lot of like actual like rock guys have gone to.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like a young rock scene that is kind of like coming from all this as well too. Some of the friends that we've made in some of the local bands, a lot of them are young, which is really awesome to see. More kids are, younger people are picking up the instruments and they're playing rock.
Well, and to the extent that you were talking about earlier, I hope that none of them are picking up bad habits and they are playing live.
Yes.
It's always encouraging when you'll hear a band admit like, yeah, for a few years there we're using some tracks, but then it's like they explained it and I never thought about it. It's like more work because you have to hit this at the right moment and then it triggers this and then that triggers that. And if anybody's off, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't sound right. So it's like, well, why don't we just play,
Right. Well, there are, and that's the funny thing because there's exceptions to the rule, like there's bands like Depeche Mode and Nine Inch Nails, and it's like uh, they have tracks, and of course they have to play to, what they've created electronically.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so I don't want to take that away from any acts and bands like
Yeah,
that.
no,
But
and it's the same thing too that like, even a rock band that has like two ballads with keyboards, they're like, we're not carrying a full-time keyboardist. We're gonna play that in there. All
right.
that's fine. But it's like, oh, I can't even remember the band. It's probably better that I don't say their name, but there was a band who's like, yeah, so our bassist is gonna miss the tour, but it's all right because we have all of his bass parts recorded. And it's like, does that seem like a good idea? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll miss whoever that member is, but I bet somebody
Right.
else could play the bass and it would probably sound just as good,
Yeah.
So,
The one
yeah,
thing that blows my mind is actually what's happening on social media where people are, they used to actually do their songs live. They'll sing, like a little snippet of their song. Now it's like lip syncing
right.
as if this is supposed to be like authentic and real. Like it blows my mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
how did this become a trend that we're just like Milli Vanilli? That's a documentary everybody should watch. I mean,
It's
those
on
guys,
Paramount Plus. Yeah, it's
yeah,
fantastic. And look, I mean, I remember those songs even before we knew anything about those guys. Wasn't my cup of tea, but Yeah, I think the guy who's still alive is Fab. I could be wrong. It could be Rob.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Fabrice Morvan. Yeah,
and just to hear them talk about it, and then it's also the simple fact is like they got in trouble for something that happens, every day now. Ashley
yeah.
Simpson lip syncing on Saturday
Ashley
Night Live in
Simpson,
the early
her ruin.
2000s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
ruined her
Career
career.
ruined because of
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
and it's like,
but
oh yeah,
yet it's accepted, and that's what we
yeah.
do every day. And
This
it's
year at
like,
the Super Bowl, right there in Vegas, Usher has a guitarist come out. There's no cord attached to the guitar. There's no guitar pack. It's just like they're just holding a guitar. I think even the Chili Peppers played like a pre-show a few years ago. Their instruments weren't plugged in, and I was like, well, that's kind of a band I expected to,
yeah,
be plugged in. And yeah, electronica, obviously, like the one time I ever saw the Beastie Boys, I was surprised at how much live instrument there was. I thought it was
mhm.
all going to be like samples and everything. And I'm like, oh, these guys can actually play. So there's bands who can get away with it, but there's also like, I don't know, and then there's always the sad thing, where it's like, oh, the singer's old and he can't sing anymore. Do they need to tour?
Right. Yeah,
And there's all that, but yeah, I mean, the lip syncing and the phony aspect of the music industry. I was going to say, like, I guess Milli Vanilli's like 30 plus years ago. Ashley Simpson was like 15, and nobody blinks anymore,
right.
And
Totally.
I think it makes sense in the pop world to an extent, but at the same time, the idea that there's rock bands, there's you don't have to comment on what I'm saying about this band, but I remember this band Falling in Reverse. Their laptop got lost, so they couldn't play a show, and Eddie Shrunk on Sirius XM was like,
Oh,
"How
that
could they
was
possibly not play?" It was like an epic rant, and that guy's like, "Oh, you're just an old man, you don't understand." It's like, what's to understand? You're a band. If you lose your laptop, it should be like, there's a couple songs we're not going to be able to play today, but we'll make it up. Maybe we'll do some covers. It's like, no, we can't play because we lost our laptop, and it's just like, oh, but we're the problem for saying that's crazy, But
yeah.
but I'm
Yeah,
glad
it's
yeah,
a touchy subject for some, for sure. I
yeah,
can just
no,
speak on behalf of, we play live and we
yeah,
work our craft as best as we can. I mean, that's because that's the bands that we loved.
yeah, of
I
course,
mean, Stone Temple Pilots, going back to the Stone Temple Pilots and the Cult, those guys are playing live. I mean, we grew up on them playing live. And if we
yeah.
can't
I mean,
play live
growing
anymore,
up,
what are we
there
even
was
doing?
never the idea that a band wasn't playing live. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the first time I saw Kiss on the reunion tour and Peter Criss sang Beth, and there's no piano on the stage, I'm like, I get it. It's
Yeah.
okay. You didn't need to
Yeah.
do that,
Right.
But for but for the most part, yeah. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's like, we want it to sound like the album did. It's like, well, I don't,
Yeah.
I love when a band is like, oh, sorry, I fucked that up. We need to start the song over again. I'm like, well,
Oh, for
good.
sure. Yeah.
Good. It's hey, he was behind on the chorus, and I love stuff like that. And
Yeah, it's funny. Actually just happened to us someplace in South Dakota. We were doing Stranger Days, and we started off. It was sounding killer, and then for whatever reason, Carl's bass went out. Like
oh no,
it just went totally out. So we didn't even stop the song. We just played the song all the way through without bass, and then he came in at the very end, and the comment, at the end is like, "You just heard Stranger Days without bass. I hope you
yeah.
enjoyed it."
Right, and
So
his bass wasn't on a computer, so
yeah,
you just had to not be able to play it. Well, let's talk about Stranger Days, because
yeah.
it is one of the songs that's out there. Our visual audience might have seen it before. I just kind of played it in the background, and we're playing it in the background again. Talk a little bit about the song and how the video came about. Talk about this song in particular, though.
This song, super deeply personal. It was Stacy actually wrote the music for it, and then it was actually probably in 22, where we're still kind of like separated a little bit of the
Sure,
pandemic
yeah,
kind of still going on. But it was something that I wanted to write, something of a ballad, something emotional, something about love, a loss of love, and kind of the contrast between, like, through the verse, it's more about self-reflection and asking for forgiveness. And then moving into the chorus is kind of like that feeling you have for somebody and how it just is so euphoric. And also kind of gives a almost surrealistic kind of like, feeling, which is hence why, Painting by Dolly, that was me trying to express that surrealism that you feel for somebody. So it was just kind of really just about that, feeling a loss of somebody, but also that euphoric feeling that you do have when you do find that right person. So kind of like a past relationship moving forward into something that is right or beautiful right now.
And referencing a painting by Dali, it's like, obviously the most famous one, of course, is Persistence of Memory with the Melting Clocks, but it's like such a perfect like allegory in the sense it's like, a lot of times life feels like a melting clock that you can't pick up and hold. It's not like, oh yeah, this is my alarm clock, I'm going to put it. No, it's just like, oh, you can't even really grab onto what's going on. And I think it's a nice comparison that, I think anybody can visualize, that means something to pretty much everybody who hears it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, it was one of the, it's actually one of the very first songs, that we tracked with Mike Gillies, before we were actually even planning on doing a whole album. So this was one of the 3 songs that we went in to originally record. And it was just, as soon as we heard it mixed, it was like, wow. I mean, I couldn't have imagined something more, for me, more beautiful than what it became from that demo. So it was actually the song that knocked Ron Keel out. It was one of those songs that just totally changed his perspective in kind of rock and roll as of late. He had said, quote, "This is the best song I've heard in 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Ron, obviously people know him from Keel. We've talked to him on the show. We've talked to a lot of bands like yourselves who, he's working with in a number of different ways, but it's also like, he's been around so long. He does his radio show. He hears a lot of music. So for him to say this is the best song in 20 years, that he's heard in 20 years, that's no small compliment when you
for whatever
consider
reason,
the number of songs. And I mean, everything that I've heard is great. We showed the video a little bit. Now being based in Vegas, I feel like the deserty sort of scenes are probably somewhere there in Nevada.
They are. Yeah. Everything's shot on location here in Vegas. So we've done the Rio Hotel is actually where I believe the video starts, me waking up, and then there's kind of the words projected on me and stuff. And then Nick Best is actually the kind of really big muscular guy. He was actually History Channel's World's Strongest Man at one time. Yeah. So,
I did notice the big guy in the video. Everybody check out the video. If you're on YouTube, you'll see it. You can click over to the Crashing Wayward page, but audio audience, just Google it and you'll see him. Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing about him, he actually drives a Mini Cooper. So we thought it'd be funny that this huge, big, muscular guy pulls me out of the back of his Mini Cooper. So, the video is supposed to be it's just to be fun. We want to do something a little more conceptual because the previous videos that we did were more performance based.
Sure. Yeah.
So we thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit more conceptual. And we worked with the director, Jimmy Romero, who directed this one. He currently is playing in Jet Boy. I believe he's in Australia right now, but we had a lot of fun shooting this and just kind of I wanted it to capture a little bit more of a B movie quality, which I think it does, and I just wanted it to be a little bit more fun and, capture that kind of feel to it it's like be able to like have fun with ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously, because the song is, really kind of a beautiful, serious song. So I wanted to flip it out a little bit.
Yeah. And it's fun to have, even in this day and age, to have those videos that, tell a story, have some kind of narrative, because, you know, when you think of the classic videos, yeah, the ones where they're performing are all great, but the ones that you really remember and stay with you are the ones that tell a story. I still don't know what the November Rain video is about, but
Right.
you know, there's a lot of time to try and figure out, and like, why is Ricky Rackman there? But anyway,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, those are the ones, you know, from the fun ones, like, you know, the Twisted Sister ones, and then just the ones that look cool, you know.
Yeah.
It's fun when bands still take the time to do any kind of concept video. Obviously, you know, the performance video kind of lets you show off a little bit, but I like when there's a story, because then I'm trying to figure out what's going on. You know, I'm watching it right now, trying to not get too distracted, because, you know, there's the lady who takes
There's a
the hood
beautiful
off.
woman there.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Which, you know, that's also an important part of the art of music videos, is there has to be an attractive woman at some point in a video.
Yeah, and that's Jessie. She performs with Little Miss Nasty, if you're familiar with them.
I'm not, but
Okay.
if
Oh,
that's
that's
in
something for you to
Vegas.
check out.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
they're actually I think they're based out of LA, but they perform
Okay.
quite a bit here in Vegas. But yeah, I think you'll get a kick out of that. Check out Little Miss
No, I
Nasty.
definitely will. I'll make
Yeah.
a note of that for sure.
Yeah.
So you were talking earlier, there's a couple more songs that you know, you want to have on the vinyl pressing. What are you guys working on right now in terms of new stuff? And, you know, we talked a little bit about just hoping to get some more opportunities to play a bunch more shows, maybe, you know, in front of some big crowds, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually, March 15th, we are going to release a digital 45 of 2 alternative remixes of Stranger Days. So
Oh,
we
cool.
have an unplugged version, and then we also had a friend, Snakes of Russia, do a remix where it's kind of very ambient and dark, and it has an element of electronica to it. I really like that version. It's really kind of cool. It's kind of got this like dark wave kind of vibe to it. But we're going to release those 2 March 15th as a digital 45. And then moving forward from that, we do have In Bed With My Head, which is that hard hitter that I was speaking of. That's
Right.
going to
Yeah.
be yeah. So we want to release that as a single as well too, and do a video for that, hopefully. And then hopefully get that pressed into the vinyl version of Listen. But we also do have 2 more songs that we are going to release as well. One's a cover song of Circles, the Post Malone song, Circles. And this is a really cool, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. It has a very cool, like early U2 Joshua Tree kind of vibe to it.
Oh,
You
cool.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have that come out. And we're working on another track, Bullet for a Heart, which is going to be another hard hitter as well too. Anthemic hard hitter. So we're constantly working. We're writing right now. We are in the studio. And we are actually, I just got off a Zoom with our manager earlier today, and there's talks of us hopefully getting over to Asia sometime soon, and Europe, and continuing the Midwest and an East Coast run through 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the old fashioned way is probably still the best way. Get in front of people, and then they see you, and then they definitely want to check it out. And you know, there's the nice touch where you can put as many videos as you want on the YouTube channel. You just have to put the words "Crashing Wayward" out there so that people know to look for it. And
Right.
you know, seeing you guys in a venue is probably the best start there. One final thing, you were talking about alternate versions of Stranger Days, and one of them's being acoustic. And you know, I really like the presentation of acoustic versions of songs. You know, I love that MTV Unplugged. I think that, like, the first time you hear that acoustic Eric Clapton Layla, you're like, wow, that blows my mind, but I still want to hear the electric one, you know.
Right.
But it's cool as like a choice. And you know, one of you're probably the Kiss album that I'll want to listen to the most is their Unplugged, because you can just, the music sounds better when it's arranged
Right.
that way. Not everybody likes that idea, you know, and look, I love when something rocks, but I always like it as a choice, and that's always pretty cool when a band's like, here's an acoustic version of that. How do you feel about you know, taking that as an approach, you know, slowing something down?
I'm, you know, in the past I would have been very like dismissive or kind of like put my foot down. No, it has to rock, you know.
Right.
But I think these days I'm up for the challenge, you know, doing something that's acoustic. Um, it can be difficult, you know, like not every song translates into an acoustic song. So, you know, you have a really good song when it does translate acoustically, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm up for the challenge of finding the song that does work acoustically, and also doing cover songs. So, you know, I was always kind of like resistant on that as well too, but people love a good cover song, and especially when we perform it live. And going back to that, like kind of getting out to the people, that is what we have to, we're kind of taking it back to the grassroots of how things used to be done. You know,
Right.
we're looking at marketing, kind of like grassroots marketing, playing shows, but, you know, just trying to rely only on social media to grow our following it's like counterproductive in a way, you know.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get out there in front of as many people as we can, because we know that's our best selling point. And now going back to the acoustic thing, we've kind of, with our social media, started this acoustic series where it's just like me
Oh,
and
cool.
one of the guys that are in my living room, and we're just doing an acoustic version of one or two songs and a cover song, which we're doing on our social media right now. We actually just did the first one for Bullet for a Heart, which is our new track, and we're actually recording the electric version of that as well. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it where I used to not. So it's kind
Yeah.
of fun now, you know.
Yeah,
When
no, I
I'm
mean, it can be fun when a band, you know, has the few acoustic songs in the set. And, you know, I in passing I mentioned Tesla, and, you know, they had some success, and then their acoustic record, which by the way also had covers on it. You know, their biggest song, Signs, is a
right,
cover, you know. So it's there's something to be said for just sort of giving people something a little different. And obviously, you know, acoustic stuff happens now, you know, so it's so much more common. Like I feel like you know, you hear the acoustic version of the Foo Fighters Everlong more than you hear the electric one now, because the first time they ever did that, I was like, oh, that's so cool. You know,
right,
you kind of forget. It's like, you know, you don't hear the studio version of I Want You to Want Me. You hear the Budokan version of Cheap Tricks, I Want You to Want Me, because it's like, oh, it just sounds better, you know.
yeah,
And
right,
you can, yeah, it's just what people prefer. And yeah, look, not everything lends itself to being acoustic, but I'll commend, you know, even Metallica. Sometimes they won't just do like Nothing Else Matters. They'll try to completely rearrange. I think it was Blackened. You know, they try to take. There's like, we're gonna try this. We're gonna see what it is. And I'm like, you know what? That's kind of a cool idea. I like when bands try to, you know, just sort of basically dissect their stuff and reassemble it. You know.
right. Yeah, you know, it's funny is you know, some people might hate me for this, but out of the 90s Seattle or grunge bands, Nirvana was never the one, you know, my favorites. It was always like
Sure.
Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, you know, Stone Temple Pilots, but I will listen to Nirvana Unplugged. I thought
Nirvana
that
Unplugged is
over
great.
any of their albums, yeah.
Alice in Chains Unplugged, I would probably also listen to before I
For
listened
sure.
to a couple of their studio albums. But yeah, Nirvana Unplugged, it has, you know, some of their songs, but it's also like, you know, it shines a light on. There's two Vaseline song. There's one Vaseline song, two Meat Puppet songs,
Right,
and
the Bowie.
you know, that Bowie, Man Who Sold the World. I
Yeah,
remember hearing that for the first time. I'm like, I don't know this song. And then I dig up
right.
the original and I'm like, okay, I mean, it's
Yeah.
cool and that, but it's
Yeah,
like, it's definitely a Bowie album track. You know what I mean?
right.
It's like, oh, it didn't sound at all like I wanted to, you know. So
Right.
yeah, I think there's definitely something to acoustic, but I do also understand it's not for everybody, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
it's good to have it as an alternative. Well, I want to make sure. I hope it doesn't look too blurry on the screen and it's formatted incorrectly. But there's a lot of ways to find Crashing Wayward. The easiest, you just go online, you type in Crashing Wayward. But there's also Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, crashingwayward.com. I feel like, you know, I've even had bands tell me, it's like, yeah, we have all that. Just type the band into Google. You guys have the YouTube.
Yeah, it's
and
all there. Yeah.
it's good. You have a name like Crashing Wayward. It'll stick with you. You can type it in. There's not 4 bands named Crashing Wayward that you have to worry about, you know? So,
yeah, you know, what's funny about that too is like, how many times, you know, a few people, not all the time, but sometimes like, did you guys get inspired by Stabbing Westward? I'm like, how about all the bands with the name Black in it or White? It's like the one band you got is Stabbing Westward.
No, are the Black Keys the same as the White Stripes? I don't think so. You know?
Right.
So,
Totally,
that's I hadn't thought about Stabbing Westward in a while. Actually, it's interesting. Anyway, Peter, it was great chatting with you again. I'm glad that you guys are working on new stuff. I'll have to keep my eyes out the next time I'm in Vegas, or I'll also see, you know, if I make sure I catch you if you guys are out here in Southern California again sometime soon. Definitely love to check out a show. But in the meantime, going to the YouTube, I was able to. That's the easiest deep dive. It's a lot of like, well, you can here's the files on your phone you can listen to, and I'm like, I'm just gonna, you know, put my headphones on and watch it on YouTube. It's just easier than doing it that way. I appreciate your time, and our audio audience is about to hear Stranger Days. Our video audience, you'll have to go click on. It'll probably be a suggested video right after this, because even though it's your song, Peter, if I tried to play your song, I feel like I could get struck by YouTube. I've been down that road before, so I never actually play the music. You get to see the videos, you just couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
So everybody check out Crashing Wayward, and hopefully we get a chance to chat again soon, Pete.
Absolutely. Thank you.